Stand! Stand! Stand!
You want to dance? Ask me nicely. Let's talk. Better listen very carefully.
No problem. You having fun?
No!
Thanks.
Hello, and welcome to Jean-Pod Van Damme, Episode 9. This is the podcast where we talk about Van Damme movies because, they pretty much contemplate the complexities of life and kicking the shit out of people. I'm your host, Marcus Jones, and joining me today is Peter Moran from the We Love to Watch podcast. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm doing awesome, man. I just watched Universal Soldier Regeneration, so I'm feeling it.
Yes, we are talking Universal Soldier Regeneration from 2009 today, which can be either considered the second, third, or fifth movie in the series, depending on what you consider canon.
Yeah, I got no idea how the canon works for this series at all.
Yeah, it's the fifth film in the series. Two of them aren't considered canon because they were made-for-TV Canadian films that were like backdoor pilots for a series that were made after the original company that produced the first film lost the rights to it. So those weren't considered. And then in 99, Van Damme did Universal Soldier: The Return, which bombed and everyone hated. And then this movie came out, and it's kind of a direct sequel to the first one, and it ignores everything from The Return.
Which is a good move, because I'm pretty sure that the last two movies and the first one were the only ones that were well-reviewed, right?
Yeah, and even the first one wasn't that well reviewed, but these last two, with good reason, have kind of come around.
Yeah. I was gonna say, do you want me to just jump right in? Because
basically, I'm gonna ask you kind of what your experience is with Van Damme, how you kind of first came across him, and your general opinions on him, and why you chose this movie.
So, I'm like everybody. I was exposed to Van Damme as Goofball Van Damme, Street Fighter Van Damme, and Time Cop. He's got that charming, handsome, sort of smirky smile, and he does the splits. And I never really took him seriously as an actor. And I actually never really delved deep into his filmography either. I was always more of like a Schwarzenegger or even Stallone guy. And this movie is pretty important to me, because this was when I started taking him seriously as an actor and started looking back at all the sort of weird choices he's made over the years and realized that he's kind of he started as a great martial artist that wasn't that great of an actor, and then he grew into kind of a great actor in a lot of ways. And I think this movie shows off a side of him that I don't think anybody had really seen much of.
That's definitely true, especially in the more action movie genre thing, because I think maybe a year before this, or maybe 2 years, is when he did JCVD, which was kind of a big turning point for him as far as people taking him seriously or starting a slow comeback that he had. But yeah, even this in 2009, his last theatrical release movie was 1999's Universal Soldier: The Return, and this is still 3 years out from his next movie that got a wide theatrical release, which was The Expendables 2.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it took him basically, The Expendables barely counts, because The Expendables is like a purposeful throwback to people whose careers have waned and need one last sort of hurrah. I'd argue these movies do a better job at saying goodbye to action stars than any of the Expendables movies do.
Well, yeah, because even those still focus on the old guys. It's like, no, we still got it. We're going to keep doing this. We'll have a young guy or two in here, but they're fodder and background actors at best. But this one and Day of Reckoning, the following one, both kind of put the lead in the hands of a newer, younger action star, and Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren kind of play more, second fiddle, like they're supporting characters, and even in Day of Reckoning they have even smaller parts than in this. I don't know, it works, because again, this one we get, what's his name, the Pitbull.
Yeah. He's so scary.
He is Andrei Arlovsky.
Andrei Arlovsky,
yes, who was also... Yes. Yeah, who was also in Day of Reckoning as well, but I just call him Pitbull, because that was, I guess, his MMA or UFC name, whatever. I don't know what he's from. We have them. And then in Day of Reckoning, Scott Adkins, who I think is great.
Yeah, Scott Adkins, these two movies, I watched them fairly close together, and that these movies were my introduction to how great DTV cinema could be. And because for years I just kind of shucked it off as not my brand of trash. And
well, especially DTV action movies.
Yes.
Like they just seem so throwaway most of the time.
yeah, and these movies showed me a side of it that really made sense to me right away, especially this movie because it has, like you said, the pit bulls in it, and it has such direct, vicious combat. Also, who's the little, his name's like Mike Pig.
Oh, Mike Vu or Fu? Something like
on.
that?
I got it wrong.
The
here.
UFC
Mike Pyle.
fighter?
Yeah, Mike Pyle.
Oh no, yeah, that guy. There's another like UFC fighter or something that has a small role as one of the old Unisol units. I think his name's Mike Fu or something. But yeah, Mike Pyle, who I thought was really good, and they kind of set him up in this movie to be in the next one, and I don't believe he is.
Yeah, I don't really know what the deal is. Maybe he didn't like acting. Maybe something went wrong. But yeah, contracting MMA guys for these roles is so smart because it lends these movies an energy that makes Hollywood movies look so glossy and weak. Like, the MMA fighting in this is so rough and tumble. It's so vicious.
It is. It works great for the action element of it, especially since action has changed so much since the heyday of like Van Damme and Schwarzenegger and stuff. But it's kind of like, that's kind of how a lot of these guys got started even in Van Damme's day. Like, he was a martial artist and then he got put into movies. So now to have like, you use the big stars in supporting roles, and then even in like the latest Kickboxer movie, Van Damme kind of plays the supporting role. And I forget the guy's name, but he's another like MMA UFC fighter, the slash stuntman that took the lead role. And it's just a kind of bringing in the new wave of action stars, I feel like.
I think Van Damme likes playing supporting guys. Like, I watched Dragon Eyes, where he plays the mentor, and that's also
which is actually another film he did, with Peter Hyams.
Yeah.
John Hyams, who
yeah.
was Peter Hyams' kid, and Peter Hyams did like Time Cop and Sudden Death and Enemies Closer with Van Damme.
Yeah, and Peter Hyams did the photography for this, and this looks a lot better.
Oh yeah, no, it looks great. But usually, Peter Hyams does his own like cinematography on his own movies that he directs. So I think this is the first time he just was DP on a movie and didn't direct it, but he did it for his kid, and yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah, it does, and it looks a lot better than Dragon Eyes, which I assume Peter Hyams didn't do the photography
for.
No,
probably not.
Dragon Eyes is a really ugly looking movie. That's more what I expected out of DTV movies. This is just both this movie and the sequel just feel like a punch in the face. To borrow an action that there's a lot of in this movie.
Well, and John Hyams did do this and Day of Reckoning, and also I found on his IMDb that he's doing a Maniac Cop remake for next year. I'm really excited about that.
The idea of the idea of having, I think Robert Z'Dar was the original Maniac Cop, right? Mm-hmm. Having this
R.I.P.D.
Yeah, exactly. This massive dude to come in and just like play this like vicious looking cop, especially right now, feels so perfect.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited of where that could go, because it's a movie I really like. I've never seen the third one, but the first two Maniac Cop films I really like, but that's one that could use a remake. And actually just a couple of years ago, because that was a William Lustig movie, they also did a remake of Maniac with Elijah Wood that I thought was excellent.
I love
both
I'm
excited
Maniac
to
movies,
see that.
yeah, and I think it's I'm open to the idea, yeah, for sure. And I think is the Maniac Cop one Nicholas Winding Refn's production.
Yeah, he's producing it, yeah.
Pretty cool. I love his idea of just taking these like flawed exploitation movies and blowing them up into remakes. Like Witchfinder General and What Have You Done with Solange? Like I love the idea of taking these old sort of interesting but maybe not perfect trasher pieces and giving them a second life. It's a beautiful idea.
Well, yeah, and it's a lot better than, just remaking things that were already popular and people already like, then are definitely going to be disappointed by a remake.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you take these ones that have like maybe small fan bases or aren't that known, or especially had a cool idea but didn't execute it properly, to go back and do that, like, that's what remakes are for.
Exactly. Nobody wants to see a remake of something that you already love and thinks perfect.
So to jump into Universal Soldier Regeneration a bit.
Sorry, I will go off the... Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. I'm sure there'll be plenty of that, because I have maybe a page of notes. I didn't take that many. I was just into the action. So the original movie had both Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren in it as two soldiers from Vietnam that killed each other and then were both put in the Unisol program, which kind of brought them back to life and made them super strong, give them a healing factor, stuff like that. Kind of like a Weapon X program, pretty much. Just no adamantium, no mutations. So they did that, and then 2 direct-to-video movies followed that continued with the same characters played by different people, but Burt Reynolds is in both the second and third one, and Gary Busey is in the second one. I haven't seen them, but they're on my list to find. I'm pretty sure they're on YouTube, so they wouldn't be that hard to find. So then Universal Soldier: The Return, Van Damme comes back. None of the other characters do. He is no longer a Universal Soldier. He's just a human again. He has like a 13-year-old daughter, and it's garbage. It's a garbage movie, but it can be a little fun at times. And then jump forward a few years, actually like 10 years later, and John Hyams gives us Universal Soldier: Regeneration, which again, I think a big strong point in both of these movies is that even though you have Van Damme and Lundgren to like help sell it, you have those big names from the 80s and 90s, you still kind of give the protagonist to someone new that can maybe do a little bit better action than these guys, even though they still hold their own pretty well.
It feels weird that this series has sort of tracked Van Damme's whole career, where I've seen the first one and the last 2, and that, you know, he was in the first one, and I don't think he did a very great job at this sort of cold, calculating, like, robot killer kind of thing. I don't think he did a very great job at that.
No, because that was like 90, 91, maybe 92 at the latest, so he was still pretty early on, and his biggest trait, like the biggest thing he had that worked for him, was his charisma, and he couldn't use it in that movie.
Yeah, exactly. That is perfect, because it shows what it takes to play a sort of withdrawn, cold character, and it's actually kind of tough to give these sort of gentle micro performances out of something that, you know, could just be played totally flat and totally monotone. And I think Van Damme in the first one plays it in flat and monotone, and then in the last 2 Universal Soldier movies, he's completely changed. Yeah, he's completely changed as an actor. It's great.
Yeah, he totally goes like Colonel Kurtz on like the last 2, especially Day of Reckoning. But no, he does such a great job, and I think that's just his progression as an actor. Because even if you look at Universal Soldier: The Return in '99, like that's just Van Damme still being that early '90s Van Damme. He still hasn't quite broken out of that yet, but you can tell he's kind of tired because he's had a string of like bombs. This was the last movie that was theatrically released for over a decade, or close to a decade. So it was straining. It didn't really work. But by the time 2009 came around, he spent a decade in directed-DVD purgatory, like just putting out. And there are some good movies in there where he kind of grew as an actor and took weird choices. Like one I always recommend to people is Replicant, with him and Michael Rooker, where he plays dual roles. One is like a serial killer that sets fires, and the other one as a clone of that killer that is treated like a dog by Michael Rooker.
Wow, I gotta see that. I love Michael Rooker.
Yeah, like, and it's like 2002 maybe, so like early 2000s when he was just getting into his direct-to-DVD thing, and he kind of started to take different chances, and it's a really, well, I mean, it isn't perfect, it has its problems, but it's a pretty good movie.
I will have to check that out, because that sounds like something that really appeals to me. It sounds like just the sort of weird direct-to-video trash that I love.
Yeah,
I've grown to love.
I recommend. Yeah. But by the time 2009 comes around, he spent all that time, you know, just doing whatever, doing these kind of trash movies, doing some interesting choices. He had done JCVD at this point, so, you know, he's kind of a bit more weathered and hardened, and he can play kind of like a cold, detached kind of like killer that's trying to deal with his past and his lack of memory and stuff in this movie, so he knocks it out of the fucking park in this.
Yeah, he's got serious pathos. So there's a sequence that's it would be on the nose if it wasn't for a direct-to-video movie, because there's a sequence where the doctors are all talking about him, and he's in the lab room, and they're kind of prepping him for battle, and they're relating him to a fighting dog, like a pit bull. That's one of the reasons I remember that dude's name is Pitbull, because I just think about this movie as like basically pulling out an old junkyard dog and making him fight again. Like, it feels that tragic. And yeah,
which is exactly how they describe it.
Yes, they describe it exactly like that in that scene, and it's lends a lot of tragedy to the role, because he's like not really a human anymore, but he's attempting humanity, and it's a really great way to like jumpstart your series, because when he goes off when he goes off on his killing spree, it is unsentimental. It is brutal. You don't know if he's actually doing the right thing. Like, you don't know if he's actually going to kill the kids once he rescues them. Like there's like a lot of questions on the line because he does not feel human.
Yeah, and it does set up the next movie perfectly because it ends with him just, like, running away. And then, like, you don't know what... They basically say, like, okay, so we can get him ready and defeat the Pitbull, the next-gen Unisol that is way better than him, by double pumping him full of these chemicals and getting him back, but we're going to have maybe an hour's worth out of him, and all he's going to know to do is to save the kids and turn off the detonators, and then he's going to have nothing after that.
Yeah.
So we have no idea how he's going to respond. To see him running off and then see where he ends up in the next movie, I thought that was a great transition for that character. Because when it comes down to it, the Universal Soldier movies are very much about that character, the Luke Devereaux character, and to a little bit lesser extent, the Andrew Scott, Dolph Lundgren character. But yeah, so this movie is great on action. There is a car chase in the first 2 minutes.
Yes.
Like, immediately starts with the Pitbull kidnapping what I guess is the Prime Minister's kids?
Yeah, he's the Prime Minister's kids of Russia, it would have to be. Or is it... Well, okay, so here's the issue.
They're all speaking Russian.
Yeah, they're all speaking Russian, but they take them to Chernobyl or Pripyat. And so does that mean that they, like, went and killed Ukrainian soldiers? Because Chernobyl is not in Russia anymore.
Yeah. Well, and also the radical group that's they take over the Chernobyl power plant, and basically they're asking for the release of a bunch of political prisoners, but they're also asking for just kind of like sovereignty for their nation, which is Palistan. Mm-hmm. So they were asking kind of like to be left alone and to let their political prisoners go. So I don't know much about the politics of this area.
Yeah.
So I just kind of went along with it. Had a much harder time believing that, you know, they have these Unisols, the old models, kind of kept to the side just in case. But for some reason, Van Damme's Unisol got to go out and try to be rehabilitated for some reason.
Yeah, I think that the mystery behind the lore makes this movie more fun. Because it sort of lets you fill in the gaps. Like, is this sort of like a Metal Gear Solid thing where a lot of countries... I don't know if you've played those games or not, but
yeah,
where a lot of countries have the Metal Gear Solid units all of a sudden, but they slightly differ on, you know, what the applications are for them. Like, or is Luke truly unique? Like, Luke is the one that isn't just a robot. He's got some humanity in him, and if you tweak him the wrong way, he's going to lose everything that he's built up over the years.
Well, see, and that's weird too, because they even describe him when they're talking about, I thought we had 5. Well, we only have 4 now because this one is doing this weird behavioral therapy to try to reintegrate into society. And I don't know, I guess it makes sense because maybe he does have the most of his humanity left, but they also said that he was the best out of the whole group, so it seems like that's the one they would want to keep just in case. But I don't know if he was, like, on loan to that doctor from, like, the lab or something. Like, she had some, like, research or something she was doing, and that somehow was able to get a Unisol to practice on. I don't know. It does make a lot of sense, but I will mention that, of course, Dolph Lundgren dies. Well, I mean, they both die, but at the end of the first movie, Dolph Lundgren is killed, and then he comes back in this movie, and he also comes back in the next movie, through cloning. And cloning is actually something that was introduced to the series in the second and third direct-to-TV movies. Or I think the third one is where it was introduced. So it's weird. They're playing with ideas that came from those 2 shitty movies they want to ignore.
Yeah, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and she was like, wait, so... they're clones or are they robots? And I was like, I don't know. And then somebody punched somebody, and I was like, just watch that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a little bit of both. They're not so much robots. They are just super soldiers in a way. They were brought back from the dead, so they're kind of like zombies. But yeah, they keep just replacing parts whenever things go bad with other dead soldier parts. And they're basically just like are kept on these drugs that keep them obedient and keep them susceptible to suggestion, and are also pumped full of drugs that make them, you know, well, not impenetrable, but make them not feel pain and make them, you know, just be able to take hits and super strong.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Frankenstein in here. There's actually a lot of bit of Blade Runner in here.
Oh, there is one scene in particular that
Yes.
I love that is just basically like a give me more life fucker scene.
Yes, exactly. Do you often contemplate the complexity of life? So the scene where Dolph Lundgren is, it's a direct Blade Runner rip where Dolph Lundgren is talking to his scientist and his father.
Who actually even looks a little bit like the dude from Blade Runner.
And Dolph Lundgren looks a lot like Rutger Hauer, just with...
That's true.
Just like a less refined Rutger Hauer. Like, he looks like Rutger Hauer if his face took steroids.
He looks like the Robert Zadar of Rutger Hauer.
But like they had to break apart the chin because it wouldn't fit in there. They had to put some of it in his cheeks. Like it's just, they had to shove a lot of Robert Zadar bones in there. Because Dolph Lundgren is an interesting dude as well, because Dolph Lundgren is a actual genius in real life, but he got labeled as an idiot for so many years because he didn't speak English
he has
well.
like engineering degrees and stuff like that. Yeah, because he was Swedish, but he has engineering degrees and stuff. But I mean, yeah, he's a smart guy, but he's also still starring in like Kindergarten Cop 2 and shit like that.
Yes. And I don't know if his career has grown the way that that Van Damme's has. It definitely has not grown on such a straight trajectory as Van Damme's has.
It's kind of similar, but Dolph Lundgren hasn't really had the comeback that Van Damme has, but I don't think he ever really reached the lows that Van Damme did. I mean, maybe kind of, because he was, again, in direct-to-video stuff throughout the 90s and 2000s as well, but I don't think he ever got to the height that Van Damme did, so he didn't hit a fall as big as Van Damme did.
Yeah, like Van Damme's story is vaguely Goodfellas-esque, especially with like the cocaine abuse and the divorces and stuff, but... I don't think Dolph Lundgren would have that interesting a life story. Like, I think he always kind of knew his place, like maybe at different points, like maybe around Masters of the Universe or something. He thought he was going to be, the next
But that was a
Schwarzenegger.
Canon picture, man.
That's
like,
true.
You can't expect too much from them.
But,
like, it would be a moderate hit. It could be a launching pad, but I don't think he ever thought, like, this is my big break.
But he came to America and he was making movies as a character that, has action figures that are in kids' houses. Like, he didn't know canon was canon at the time, probably, right? Like,
yeah, probably. But again, you think like Rocky IV, like that was his big break. Like he
True.
had to know, like, oh, I'm in a legitimate picture now.
Yeah, true.
Which I think was right around the same time. But also, like when he first came, like he was basically Grace Jones's boyfriend for a while, and like showed up in a couple of things. So like that would be kind of interesting. But yeah, it's just he jumped into the direct-to-DVD area a lot quicker than Van Damme did. But he seemed fine there, and he kind of slowly had a little bit of a rise. I think the Expendables and stuff is kind of where he got a little bit more high profile, and to the point where you can do Kindergarten Cop 2,
Yeah, and I bet you most people know him in Expendables from Rocky IV. I bet you most I bet you most people know Van Damme from any one of 7 movies. Like it could be a Time Cop, it could be some of his late era weird stuff. Like I think if you know who Dolph Lundgren is, it's probably because
it's like one of 3 movies.
Yeah, exactly. I don't...
It's Master of the Universe, Rocky IV, and I don't know, maybe Universal Soldier or something, or like the Expendables.
Or if you're a comic book nerd, The Punisher maybe, but that's about it.
Which I do quite enjoy. I actually like all of the Punisher movies to varying degrees.
I was going to say, Warzone is one of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast. This movie and Day of Reckoning and Punisher Warzone were movies that I wanted to like have conversations about and push forward for people to watch. And I love the Punisher Warzone.
Yeah, that's great. But I don't know, the Dolph Lundgren one is actually pretty... It's not a big comic book movies per se, but it's pretty good, and Dolph Lundgren is pretty good in it as well.
I haven't seen it. Yeah, I was planning on watching it for our podcast at some point. We could do a whole month of Punisher movies. That'd be a lot of fun.
Ooh, yeah, you can have me on for all those episodes if you like.
Yes.
But no, yeah, like, it's just a good, like, late 80s, like, hardcore action movie, more so than, like, a comic book movie. It just uses that character. But, yeah, no, there's just, like, a lot of knife killing and stuff like that.
Sounds like it's up my alley, dude. But yeah,
and of course the Thomas Jane one is kind of trashy garbage, but I like it a lot too. And you just get to see John Travolta on fire being pulled by a car. So
yeah. John Travolta. That was when John Travolta seemed to have known his place post downfall, because John Travolta is hammy as shit in that movie.
post second downfall, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He's had a series of uplifts and downfall. He's had sort of, not to the same level, but the arc of his career could probably be tracked similar to Van Damme's career. Like
a little bit, except it's gone on longer, so there's been a lot more ups and downs. But I feel like Travolta is basically just in a Nicolas Cage role right now. Like he does the same kind of shit Nicolas Cage does, except Nicolas Cage still has bigger movies from time to time, or like art house movies where he does a good job.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage is also paying off a massive tax debt, so I've lost all. I've lost all ability to like rationalize his choices anymore, because now his choices are, I really want to keep my private island and I really want to not go to prison.
Exactly, but he still manages to sneak good ones in from time to time.
Yep.
Like in good performances like Joe and stuff like that. But yeah, then he makes that. But I also reviewed a John Travolta film from last year called I Am Wrath. And I was like, man, this seems like a familiar kind of movie. And I was like, oh, Nick Cage was originally going to be in this, but he had to drop out, so John Travolta jumped in. So they're just interchangeable at this point.
That's an ultimate insult to your movie that Nicolas Cage had to drop out.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I guess we got to call Travolta.
Exactly. Don't get me wrong. I fucking love Nicolas Cage. But, I've lost a little bit of that. But yeah, jumping back a little bit, because I could talk about this shit all day with you. The Dolph Lundgren, I think that in both this movie and Day of Reckoning, he's a really fun villain. He's got really great physicality and broad-shouldered sort of presence that I think he's doing something in the movie that the Pitbull isn't. I think the Pitbull is just this tool, and
also the quickness he has is different, because Lundgren is just basically a fucking beast.
Yeah, he's a little slower, but he'll fucking hit you like a tank. Like it's I had the thing where he says, "Do you often contemplate the complexity of life?" And I was like, good for you on getting that line out, Dolph.
That's a decent Lundgren impression.
Yeah, thank you. I shoved some walnuts in my cheeks and
I'm like Chickmunk.
I put a 5-pound weight on my chin. But and then he has also a line late in this movie, because the super soldiers are weirdly kind of like slasher villains at times. Like Andrei Arlovsky straight up has a retractable blade. Like,
oh yeah, he has a wrist knife. It is awesome.
It's so badass, dude. But Dolph,
because it's almost like the Predator thing, like the claws that come out of like the Predator's wrist and stuff like that.
Yes.
But yeah, it's intimidating.
Yes, it's a very scary thing to have this guy that'll just beat the shit out of you, and then when the moment comes, he's just slaughtering you like cattle. Like it's very serial killery, but like Michael Myers-y more for me. Like it's throwing in, the movie has horror elements in it that I really responded to.
Yeah. Well, and Dolph Lundgren, like you were saying, he is a very intimidating physical presence, but I think partially just because, again, his kind of aged years and his weathered years and stuff, in addition to the fact that he is such a smart guy in real life, like, he does bring a lot of pathos to this role. Like, he kind of does what Van Damme does in the next film in this one.
Yes. He's completely broken. And he does look like a beaten up piece of meat, like somebody that's just been brought out of that casket over and over and over again, and has had all his parts replaced over and over again. Like, he looks,
which is a good thing. It's probably one of the best uses of like the older aging action stars in movies like this. Like, oh, it actually makes sense for them to look like this.
Yeah, because he's been abused. Well, his body's been abused by the government since Vietnam. Like, like it's pretty spooky. He has, well, speaking to the horror thing I was just talking about, the Dolph has one really amazing line. He's not in the movie too long, but he has a really great entrance and a really
he shows
fantastic
up 56
exit.
Minutes in like an hour and a half long movie. Yeah, Van Damme shows up, I think about like maybe 16 minutes in and gets his first action scene about 24 minutes in. Dolph shows up 56 minutes in.
Whoa. Yeah, and Dolph has a really great moment where he's about to go murder the kids for seemingly no reason. And he says, and he's like kind of talking, Van Damme's behind him and he can feel him, and there's a sort of like history to the way they're talking, but also Dolph is, it's like Dolph has Alzheimer's or something. He's just a tool, and his mouth doesn't really connect to his brain, and he says like, "I'm just gonna do something here," when he's about to go murder the kids.
Yeah.
And it's so scary. It's
so good.
Scary.
Well, because again, these characters do have a history, because they had the original history in Vietnam, where I think Dolph Lundgren was kind of like the leader of Van Damme's unit, but he kind of went crazy and just started killing everyone he could, and he had a necklace made of ears. Oh, yeah. And their final confrontation when they died the first time was that he was going to kill these two kids. He killed a kid and tried to make Van Damme kill one, but Van Damme stopped him. They ended up shooting each other, and then the point was like they became Unisols and they erased their memories completely, and that's a thing where I think that leads into them not remembering anything. I think they just erase their memory every time they do a mission, kind of thing. But yeah, and then slowly their memories kind of pop back, or their personalities pop back as well, and I feel like that's still happening here, because not only is he, you know, a long dead soldier that's been brought back and done the Unisol thing so many times, he's actually a clone of that original guy / Unisol. So he has like maybe the most frazzled brain with just the slightest recognition of who Van Damme is. But I love that, like, there was something I was going to tell you. I can't, hang on, I'm going to do something real quick and I'll come right back.
Yeah, it's so creepy. And it's something that if you didn't know anything about their history, you would just assume that this is how Dolph is talking to everybody before he slaughters them in this whole compound. But if you knew their history, it makes it a little richer, a little bit more complex.
Because he has a line where he's just like, we've done this before. Like, yeah. we just keep doing this. Yeah. And, no, he is definitely kind of the deepest character in the movie. I feel like he gets the least amount of screen time, perhaps, but yeah, kind of the deepest character. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this movie. It has a lot of great action, but I feel like the last half hour is the movie. Like, that's where everything happens. And other than that, like, Van Damme kind of being rehabilitated, he, like, randomly goes apeshit on some dude in a diner because he thinks he's trying to come after him, which is a cool fight scene, like, brief fight scene, but I feel like it really takes about an hour for this film to really kick into high gear.
Yeah, so I love the structure of this movie. So it's structured kind of cleanly, almost cleanly, where it's like the first hour is dealing with the Pazalan Defense Force or whatever, you know, the Russian guy, dealing with the Russian Prime Minister and his family and the two kids, and sort of it brings, the first hour is bringing the main power players into negotiation. And what's amazing about this movie is that Russians negotiate with Russian separatists, or, you know, Eastern European separatists, and they reach an accord. Like, imagine a movie like where, you know, like a dude has a nuke aimed at the world, and then an hour into the movie, he's like, yeah, that you guys met our terms, like everybody's good.
It's like, we're good.
Yeah.
But no, see, well, that's the thing, is that the whole Universal Soldier thing seems kind of like ancillary to the plot. Like, it's on the side and just happens to be mixed in because, you know, the separatists are working with this one doctor that was part of the Unisol program, and so he has them at their disposal, and then, you know, they're trying to get Van Damme up to snuff so he can defeat them and stuff. So it's this thing that's kind of on the outside of the actual story, but then even when they reach that accord, is the Universal Soldier, the fact that was brought into the story is what fucks it up for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's he was a tool until the Universal Soldiers were a tool until they became something greater. And in this case, the Dolph Lundgren's character is just like an agent of chaos. Like, he doesn't, his motivations aren't to save Pazalan. His motivations aren't to, you know, become a king or anything. We don't know what his motivations are. He's just a tool of destruction. Like, maybe it's vengeance? I don't know.
Well, basically what it was, okay, so the separatist leader was working with one of the doctors of the Unisol program, and that's how they had the pit bull there as kind of an agent of that. Now, obviously, the doctor is getting paid by them, but they don't trust each other, so they get the doctor to implant these microchips in him and all of his soldiers, so that the next-gen Unisol, the pit bull, won't attack them. Like, that's what those things are used for. So the doctor has, like, a little safety net. He has his own little thing in his back pocket, which is Dolph Lundgren's Andrew Scott clone, which he is then going to use to kill the leader of the separatists and stuff to kind of build an army, because that's what his whole thing is. He's trying to build an army of Unisols. So the only two things they gave him, I think, were to kill the children, which I don't know why, but that was just like, just kill the children and kill the leader. So he kills the leader, kills his master, and then it's like, well, I guess that's still programmed into me, so I'm gonna go kill these kids.
Yeah, and eventually the pit bull also wants to kill the kids. But yeah, I love the structure of the movie because it has this like secret third act where all of a sudden the power dynamics shift, and our would-be hero that's a normal everyday person, Mike Pyle, the little Navy SEAL dude or whatever. He gets he gets some pretty good little stealth fights in there, and he gets a pretty good fight against the pit bull, and then he gets slaughtered by the pit bull. Which
is an excellent fight. And again, that's a thing where like you don't have any of your real stars of the movie in it, but like you have the new guys in there, and they perform a great fight scene. Because that's the thing, if you look at, because there's a great fight between Van Damme and Lundgren in this, and it's great, but they do a pretty good job, but you can tell it's mostly stunt doubles doing a lot of that work. But in like the fight between those two, like it just seems like them fighting each other. Like they choreographed it, they did all of it, and it works a million times better. But that dude actually really got on my nerves at the start of the movie, and then I grew to like him as the movie progressed.
Wait, which guy?
The Mike Pyle guy, the Navy SEAL guy.
He's got weird energy. He's got like, he's like Captain America's like little brother. Like he's like me too, guys. Like I'm gonna be noble and shit too. And it's very you can tell why he's in the movie, and it's just so he can be slaughtered in the third act. So it has to be Van Damme to save the day.
Well, I think it's also just to kind of juxtapose like regular humans with the old school Unisouls with the next gen Unisoul.
Yep.
So like, you see what he can do and how he can even take out like the original Unisouls, and then you see like, oh, but there's this, hero boy that's an actual just regular human, and he has to go against him. And then I think it's also just for that little reveal at the end of the movie. Yeah,
it's fun because it also it adds horror movie elements to me, like that anybody could get slaughtered by these things is pretty cool. You're right though. The last half hour is just jam packed with what you would expect out of these movies. It
just keeps ramping up.
Yes,
and it is exhilarating.
These muscle men just going at each other. But it also it saves time to have Van Damme in what I would say is the best shootout of his life, of his career.
When he just lays siege.
Yeah, where he goes to the camp and he's just shooting guys as he's running, and these trucks are blowing up and shit. And then he goes inside that building, and people are like coming down the hallway, and he's just slicing them up. Like that I think is the best shootout I've ever seen in a Van Damme movie. Like even Hard Target.
No, I agree. That is amazing because it does start like, he's amped. He has everything. He just runs over there. He does start blowing everyone away, and he has like a machine gun and stuff. He gets hit by a car at one point, and then he runs out of bullets. So he then just has his little handgun that does multiple shots at a time. And then that runs out. So he just takes out his knife and starts slicing the fuck out of everyone he comes across. It is brutal in an amazing way.
Did they see Children of Men? Because it kind of reminded me of they do a really long take of Van Damme just running through this combat, and it's sort of, the movie is very pretty looking, but it's got sort of a war movie muted palette to it. It's got like a lot of blues and browns and stuff. And
the color palette actually is a little similar to Children of Men at times.
Yeah,
especially during the action scenes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's handheld camera work and tracking shots, but it never delves into the. This is another thing I love about DTV movies. They don't really delve into the Bourne-esque, Paul Greengrass-esque shaky cam.
Like shaky cam. Yeah.
It always has. Have you ever heard of the website Outlaw Vern?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he has this rubric for action movies, and it's like action movie comprehensibility rating, and this movie would score very high on that because Peter Hyams knows exactly where to put the camera and how long the take can last before people get confused, and
and he's good at that, and he's good at changing even the level, like the eye level of the camera, and he does that a lot, especially to kind of hide stunt doubles and things like that, because a lot of times when like Van Damme and Lundgren are throwing each other through walls, they're like a little bit below head level is where the camera is, but he moves it around enough. But yeah, it never quite gets shaky. He's in the action, but he cuts like just before a shot would get nauseating or confusing.
Yes, and it's really, really expert, and that lends the the movie a sort of expensive feel. It doesn't. It's shot on digital, but it doesn't feel like it was shot on digital because that's all they could afford. Like it's a very good looking movie.
Oh yeah, and it seems like a choice. It seems like because of the kind of movie it is and the action they'd have to do, it just made sense to film it that way.
Yep. It's a. I love the way the movie looks.
And I do want to toss in the fact that Van Damme's son, Chris Van Damme, is in this movie. He plays Miles. He's the assistant doctor to the main doctor.
Oh, that's funny.
But by the end of the movie, let's be real, he's Chris Van Dead.
Yeah. He's basically...
Oddly enough, though, he's in the next movie apparently playing Miles again. So I don't remember him in the second movie. So I don't know if he comes back as Unisol, or if he's just there as the same character, or a character also named Miles.
Did they have to clone? They had to clone the doctors to make the clones, like they need the digital printer machine to make the digital printers to make the piece that they need.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a vicious cycle.
Oh wait, there's a one moment in that shootout, because it's very similar to the shootout in Day of Reckoning, where it's just very direct and it's all these fast, unsentimental, brutal movements. Van Damme is cutting throats and cutting Achilles tendons, like whatever he needs to do. He's moving around corners. Yeah. It's a gorgeous.
But it's also not crazy action the way, like you said, like the Bourne movies are. It's very like swift, fluid movements that he's doing. Like most of the time he's barely moving. Like you just see the tiniest movement in his arms, and then like people die.
Yes, and Van Damme has this sort of quiet dignity to his movements where it's balletic, but it's also pragmatic, and I really love that. There's one really great JCVD moment in this, and I'm not sure if you caught it because you were breathless. But I caught it this time because I was like, so he's about to cut one of the dudes, the last dude down with his knife. And in a little bit of a comedy moment and also a terror moment, because JCVD is very scary looking in this scene. He's just covered in blood. The guy jumps out the window instead of JCVD murdering him. And that's a total joke on his career, right? That JCVD likes to kick people through stuff? Mostly windows?
Oh yeah, no, because that is one of the tropes of his films, is like kicking people through things, and yeah, he's just kind of, he looks at him and he's like, I'll take care of this.
Yeah.
And he jumps out the window, which is a very comedic thing. And I guess we can get into that a little bit, is that this movie pretty much has no tropes of a Van Damme film, other than the fact that it's a sequel to a Van Damme franchise. But because nothing, like he's never even like shirtless in it. He doesn't have any kind of a personal vendetta against the bad guy. You could maybe say against Dolph Lundgren a little bit, but not really. Not even really like any slow-mo screaming. He doesn't really do any spin kicks or splits or anything like that. It doesn't really have anything. It's just kind of its own thing, and he just plays this character from like 20 years prior and just really evolves it.
The last two, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I'm going to put too fine a point on this. The last two Universal Soldier movies are really the only ones worth watching, I'll say.
Fair enough. I would still recommend the first one, just because
it's
solid.
Is like,
yeah, it's early, and Dolph Lundgren is really good in that movie too, because he is kind of the crazy bad guy in that, and he plays that really well. It's also an early Roland Emmerich film, so that's kind of interesting to see where his career started.
Before everybody gave him all the money.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, it was like a moderate hit. I think it had like a $20-something million budget, made like $30 million, so it wasn't a huge hit, but you know, it's enough to keep it going for fucking 20 years.
I knew it I watched it a bunch growing up from like TNT and Sci-Fi Channel reruns, which totally makes sense now, knowing how that works, or it worked in the 90s at least, where it wasn't necessarily like the Saving Private Ryans or the Independence Days that got a lot of play. It was the movies.
Also Roland Emmerich.
Yes, exactly. It was the movies that made some money.
It was the movies that were cheap to get the rights for.
Yes, exactly.
To fill in when it's like, hey, we spent a good amount of money on Independence Day and Shawshank this month. We got to toss in some Universal Soldier showings.
Exactly. So they couldn't have Jurassic Park on every day, because Jurassic Park was selling probably really great on VHS, so they were like, the rights holding was probably super high. So yeah, I saw Universal Soldier a bunch as a kid on TV because it was probably pretty cheap to purchase the rights for.
Oh yeah, well, especially since the company went bankrupt and they sold the rights to some random Toronto TV studio that made those two direct-to-video movies that were set as like backdoor pilots to a series.
It's so strange. The fact that there was a whole series about this and the lore is so complicated is weird. But it reminds me of, like I said earlier, it reminds me of like horror movies, like how complicated the Michael Myers mythology got. Like it eventually. Oh yeah,
and you can choose to believe or not call things canon, like if you want to.
Exactly. There's like alternate realities. I imagine sitting down with JCVD, like what a dream right off the bat. To be able to sit down.
That's what this podcast is all about. That's my dream goal, is to get to interview him. He actually just and I'll plug this for him. He just created his own fan site recently, like his own website. It's jcvdworld.com. And he has a bunch of cool stuff on there. He runs contests and stuff, but there were like, fan inquiries and also just like press and like work inquiries. And I totally like sent him a message being like, hey buddy, got this podcast if you ever want to come on it.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be amazing. I would really be.
Oh, it's never going to happen, but maybe through this, I'll meet someone that actually knows him and get an in or something.
Maybe what you should do is, on like his birthday or something every year, you should have fans of the show write in on that site and be like, you should go on this, because I think that's the only way that people actually go on podcasts that are famous, is when
true.
Enough people bug them to do it.
Yeah, and so if I have to, let's see, fans of this show, how many episodes have I done? 9? So I have maybe 9 guests that would look at.
Who knows, man? Like, if JCVD World isn't that big a website, it might still be flooding him. He's adorable with fans. Like, he's so cute on like Twitter and Facebook. Like,
he's great, and he is, because like he appreciates all of his fans, because he knows that's the only reason he's still around, is because people like have this attachment to him.
I mean, would I have seen Enemies Closer for any other reason? Probably not.
Nope.
Like, the title didn't make sense to me until I was 30 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not seeking out Orlando Jones movies the way I used to in the early 2000s.
Yeah, this isn't like the heyday of Orlando Jones anymore. I'm sorry to say.
Tom Everett Scott does not have the pull that he once did. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. That one thing you do is that thing you do, Tom Everett Scott.
That's true. He is actually, I saw him more recently in the TV series of Scream. He played a character on that, like the main character's long-lost dad. But yeah, it was nice. I actually really enjoyed that show.
Does it make you feel weird when dudes like that were sort of like, not quite dreamboats, but like hunky in the 90s, all of a sudden are playing dads and stuff?
A little bit, especially since like they do look like dads now. Like Tom Everett Scott in the Scream series, like he looks like he's been going pretty heavy on the beers for about 20 years and looks a little sleepy and disheveled and shit. Like, yeah.
God, I mostly just remember him from the American Werewolf in Paris.
In Paris, yeah.
And I really really think that's not what he wants to be remembered by.
Probably not. I mean, he's probably just been trying to do other things, but
yeah,
he's always the dude from Dead Men on Campus to me.
Aaron loves that movie.
I love that movie. Like, if you guys ever want to do an episode on that, I would totally be down. Me and Cole have been talking about doing it for our podcast forever, but we both love Dead Men on Campus.
We almost did it this month because we're doing nostalgia picks on our podcast, and Aaron for some reason loves that movie, and that's why nostalgia picks are so funny, because like your brain just
because Aaron is a smart guy.
Yeah, that's it. I wouldn't say that at all. I think my co-host is a dullard.
Oh, well, then both me and my co-host are also dullards, because we love Dead Men on Campus. Not that long ago, I was in some movie store in Austin, and I found a press pack for Dead Men on Campus that I immediately bought, but it was a press pack that had, like, stills from the movie. It actually had a couple of, like, film frames. It had, like, the press releases about it and stuff. Yeah, that's sitting on my shelf right now.
That's awesome. I just love like random fandom, like where you just something is just like a small tumor has just attached itself to you and will not let go.
Hey, I'm the dude that will defend Angus to his death.
Yeah.
There are just certain things I latched onto as a kid that I still like. A lot of those things don't hold up as you get older, but some still do, and it's a weird mix of maybe it's good and maybe it's nostalgia, but I can't fucking tell the difference anymore.
Yeah, that's generally the Dissolve group. I think is a group that one of the things we have in common is that we forget that our random obsessions are not shared with 99% of the world.
Well, I think the Dissolve group is like an echo chamber because of that, because you're bound to find someone else in that group that also likes that thing, and you can talk about it freely, and people are more open to like weird things, or probably have heard of them at least, to where like if you get into good conversations on the Dissolve group and then you go out into the real world and talk with people, no one has any fucking clue what you're talking about.
You're right. It's sort of got cult dynamics where they make it so comfortable and cozy on the inside. So once you get on the outside...
You think you can talk to real people like that, but no.
You're going to be sorely, sorely mistaken if you think you can just walk up to any real person and be like, hey, have you seen Under the Skin? It's definitely Scarlett Johansson's best movie. And they're like... The one where she has sex with the dude with elephantiasis of the head? No, we turned that off halfway through. And you're like, no, it's really great. It's really awesome. And then everybody stops talking.
It actually has a lot to say. And the way they filmed it was actually really interesting. And then they walk away.
Yeah, exactly.
But then I have conversations in the real world, and it's just like, I mentioned some movie or something, or someone mentions a new comedy movie that starred Kevin Hart and The Rock or something. And they're like, oh yeah, I like that. He was dumb in that movie. That's their critique. He was stupid. Equals funny. Anyway, so back to Universal Soldier.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Van Damme Dolph Lundgren fight. And most importantly, Dolph Lundgren's death scene in this movie.
Holy shit. It is the movie in I just watched Super Mario Brothers, and like I realized that sometimes there's just a moment in a movie, just a little chestnut of a moment where you're like, this is the movie right here. In Super Mario Brothers, it's the weird
I was about
Yoshi
to ask
puppet.
because I thought about like 5 different moments from that movie.
It's the Yoshi puppet because it's creepy looking but also a little like cute and endearing. Like that's the movie in a nutshell.
It's like a cute raptor from Jurassic Park.
Yes, exactly. And it's got sort of like almost Disney eyes, but he's creepy and slimy looking. Anyways, so in Universal Soldier, Universal Soldier Regeneration, I think the moment, the little nugget of truth in this movie that just sums everything else up is the moment where he stabs the pipe in Dolph Lundgren's head, and Dolph Lundgren is about to say, like, no, just wait 1 minute, and then he puts the shotgun through the pipe and shoots him, and then just unceremoniously just gets up and walks away. That is the movie.
It is amazing, and I especially love, because this is something that I think this movie has a bit above Day of Reckoning on, is that Day of Reckoning, it is so much CGI blood. I mean, I think there's more violence in it, but it is pretty much all CGI blood. This, when he blows Dolph Lundgren's head, that is a practical effect. That is a dummy head that fucking explodes with a shotgun blast, and it is amazing. And I will say, I love that, like, he shoves the pipe through his head, and then he's just like, oh yeah, I remembered what I was going to tell you.
Yes.
And he's like, no, wait a second, blows his head off. And I thought that was a great moment, but at the same time, I was like, shit, I really wanted to know what he wanted to tell him.
Yes,
Because I thought it maybe be some moment about some remembrance of who they are and where they came from and stuff.
This is what separates this movie from the first movie, where the first movie, I don't remember exactly, but if like there's a scene where he executes Dolph Lundgren, there's probably a moment where he's like, he'll give him like a moment of respect, where he's like, yeah, say your final words, man. And this, he's like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like
I don't have time for that shit anymore.
Yeah, we're cyborgs.
We're 20 years older.
Yes, we're cyborgs, and the world is exactly. Yeah.
But I will say
the idea
that,
of them being older is the reason. He's just
ain't nobody got time for that anymore. We all know. We've seen the movies. But no, the Dolph Lundgren's death in the first movie is pretty awesome because he basically puts him on like these spikes of like a farming equipment thing, like a farming machine, and then just slices him to shit.
Jesus, that's awesome. I haven't seen the movie in a while now. The sort of brutality in this movie, I think, is summarized in that scene because there's no time for the sort of like,
the one-liners and shit like that.
Yeah, it's very un-Van Damme. You're right. It doesn't have time for that. It doesn't have room
Well, again,
for
because action changed so much. See, that's why I think a lot of these guys, even Stallone and stuff, had a problem in the early 2000s because they were trying, or at least like that's what they were used to. They were still trying to make like the goofy action shoot 'em up one-liner kind of movies, and that just wasn't really the thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at. Let's talk about Stallone real quickly. What movie does this remind you of as Stallone's career? It totally reminds me of the Rambo remake, right? Or sorry, the Rambo 5 or whatever, right?
4.
4.
Yeah, definitely, because it did get much more. Again, it's all CGI blood and stuff for the most part, but it did get darker, more violent. I actually really like that one.
I do too.
Because it kind of takes the best parts of both like First Blood and the 2 sequels. So it takes like the good kind of pathos of the Rambo character from the first film, which I think is a fucking masterpiece, and then like the weird ultra violent Reagan America of the second 2 movies, and kind of puts them together for the next generation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a great way of putting it, because the second Rambo movie, and then even more the third, had
Definitely the third.
Yes. They basically, well, the third is where he teams up with the Mujahideen, right?
Yes.
Okay. There's also a Bond movie where that happened. It's just kind of a funny time in history. That was when he became, just a slice of Americana. He became like an unironic Captain America, just kind of killer. And in the first movie, it's like very tragic that he's just like this. He's this beaten up old dude that his country has ran through the ringer, and with no thank you and no help. And
I swear, anyone that wants to laugh at the Rambo series, go back and watch First Blood, or specifically that scene between him and Richard Senna, like in the final thing when they're in that gun shop, and he just like won't let go, and he just like finally breaks down and just cries to him. It is fucking powerful.
Yeah, it's people forget that Stallone had true chops as an actor. Like, I think people remember Rocky, and they will not remember Rambo. Sort of like how people think that Jason was always the killer in Friday the 13th. People only remember Rambo as Rambo. Yeah, in First Blood, I mean, it's...
Well, because he eventually had like a children's cartoon series based off the character, so
sure.
it got a little muffled somewhere.
Yes, and the new Rambo, I think, is similar to Day Reckoning in a way. I like this movie better, but the new Rambo is similar in a way, because it's about bringing back this old beaten up piece of meat and just putting him out to the only thing that he's good at, the only thing that he can actually do, and putting him to work. And yeah, unsentimental, vicious, direct violence. I'm thinking about the scene where Rambo spins around a 50 caliber machine gun and shoots one of the soldiers in the face, and it's just this like squib explosion all over the screen.
It's ridiculous, but it's kind of awesome. Like, that is the thing we want out of the action movies. But yeah, it seems like they cut the fat. Like, there's no time for bullshit or one-liners or any kind of sentimentality or any wink at the camera. It's just like, no, they don't have time for that. They've lost any like humor in the world. They lost any kind of sentimentality about the world. Like, they know what they have to do, they know their place, and they fucking do it.
Yeah, so I guess I have you're a fan of Van Damme throughout his career. I'm more of a late era Van Damme guy. Like, I like him now more, like that he's making like Enemies Closer is kind of my ideal Van Damme. This or Enemies Closer, where he's just like a goofball villain role, where he just seems like he's having insane amounts of fun, and he's completely committed to the role, and he seems
because he gets to do something different. Yeah. But no, it's great, and I love that. But I also have such a huge soft spot. A, because it speaks to like my taste palette in film, and B, because it's the kind of stuff I grew up watching so much. But like 80s and 90s campy, cheesy, like horror action movies and stuff, that is my bread and butter. That's like the stuff that I grew up on. Yeah.
Like, how do you relate to the idea that, like, a lot of people like me see this late era, more brutal Van Damme stuff as, where he should be, and the fact that you also love his like lighter, stranger stuff from the 90s, where he was like funnier and goofier. Like, do you lament that, or do you just like all of it?
Well, I don't like all of it. I do have a line, which we'll get to in a little bit, but It's mostly I just appreciate all of it. Like I appreciate the journey that he's gone on. Like I just, as much as anyone else thinks that this is where he should be right now, is where he is in his career, to where like he can do both. Like he can do more serious action movies like the Universal Soldier movies. He can do kind of, you know, revamps, rehashes of the past, but, you know, taken a little more seriously, like the most recent Kickboxer movie. And he can do comedy like Jean-Claude Van Johnson, which he was fantastic in. Like, he can kind of do all that, but I like seeing where all that came from, and it is, like, these movies from the 80s and 90s that made him big are great, but, like, yeah, they're not all fantastic, especially when you get into, like, the mid to late 90s stuff and the early 2000s stuff, but there are a couple of gems along the way. But I just kind of like Van Damme as an actor. I like the choices that he's made, and even when his films aren't that great, I usually at least enjoy watching him.
Yeah, and I think that, like, it's funny because I want to see the full cut of Hard Target, but what's funny about that movie is I think that, for me, that encapsulates the best of early Van Damme, because it's goofy and strange, and that sort of goofy, strange energy that Van Damme can't help but put off in a lot of his roles is perfectly suited to the kind of energy that John Woo can't help but put off. So, like, he's not the best actor in Hard Target. That's Lance Henriksen in a mile. Like, Lance Henriksen is so fucking
well, and
good.
Arnold Vosloo.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
he is fantastic in that as well.
Yes, and I think that the early Van Damme, like, I prefer it when the movie is as goofy as he is. That's why I don't really like Time Cop as much, because Time Cop takes itself very, very seriously, and he's so strange and funny. Like,
kind of.
Yeah, I don't know.
It does to an extent. It is a more serious movie, but at the same time, it is kind of a silly time travel movie as well, and there is a lot of humor in it. But
there's a very earnest sex scene in it. That's mostly what I'm thinking about.
Which I quite enjoyed as a young boy, because I grew up with a huge crush on Mia Sara, so I was blown away by that. Yeah. It was, and that's, I don't know if you had this at all. My grandma used to run a used bookstore when I was a kid, so I spent a lot of time, like, I made it my mission to, like, organize the movie adaptation section, which I turned into a section it didn't used to be, because I spent a lot of time there, so I had to have little projects to do. But Time Cop novelization, there was very much like a written out version of that sex scene, which I quite enjoyed. And there was a lot of that when I was a kid, to where, like, there would just be novelizations of movies, and there would be novelizations of the sex scenes from movies. And that did it for me. Like, I was all about that.
I didn't specifically have that too much, though I did have that a couple times, like, reading novelizations of James Bond movies, which is such a strange concept. Like, like, especially, like...
So not the Ian Fleming ones, but the ones the second guy did that were, like, just novelizations of the movies?
Yes, and that's where, I remember a specific sex scene in Die Another Day where they were talking about Halle Berry's navel, and I was like, what the fuck is a navel? And so for years, because of that book, I thought navel meant vagina.
I bet that caused a couple of weird sexual experiences when you were a teenager.
Weird, but necessary.
Necessary. You had to figure out where to put it, I guess.
In that movie, he's putting a literal diamond in her navel. So it really, really freaked me out as a kid. Because, like, a diamond in a belly button, whatever. A diamond in a vagina, that's dangerous.
Wait, I have to ask you, how old are you?
I'm 25.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. I was like, Die Another Day? Like, how are you a child? I'm not that much older. I'm only 29, about to turn 30. But I will say probably the weirdest one that I had kind of an obsession over at that time in my life was the novelization of The Astronaut's Wife, the Johnny Depp, Charlize Theron movie.
That is so weird. Because there was
a really sexily written, like, a really hot sex scene written into that book. I've actually still never seen the movie, so I don't know what the sex scene in the movie is actually like, but it was done very well in that novelization.
God, I love the concept that this tiny nugget of erotica was just so formative for us, specifically you, and people all over there.
No, for like 12-year-old Marcus, it was all about those sex scene novelizations.
But I've never, I don't know a single person who reads written erotica literature right now. Like, I don't know anybody in my life. Maybe I just need to change my friend circles. Cause,
maybe. I mean, just pick up a copy of the novelization of The Astronaut's Wife and just have a ball. Pour yourself a bath, get some bubbles in there, pour a glass of wine, and just treat yourself.
The This is literally what eBay is for. God. I just love the idea.
So of course,
I just love the idea of like you being a teenager or something, and your mom walks in, and there's just like Kleenex and lube and stuff, and you're just, and then she's like,
and a book with Johnny Depp's face on the cover.
She's like, oh, thank God, he's just reading about astronauts. Oh, thank God.
Hey, that astronaut had a wife. Let me tell you.
And she's nice.
Yeah.
So wait, hold on. I need context for the sex scene. So was he like going into space? And he's like, I don't know if I'm gonna come back, babe. It's like, let me take off 6 hats and then let's do it.
It is the sex scene after he comes back from space, and he is different.
Oh, so is it still sexy?
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah, no, it's very sexy in the book, but it seems like a little off because she's like, it's a bit more aggressive than usual, and he seems like he's on a mission, and that's because he's trying to impregnate her.
Oh God, that is really, wait, is Astronaut's Wife like a Species type movie?
A little bit. I was actually about to bring up the novelization of Species, which I also read.
That's hilarious. I've not read either of those, but I'll have to do some eBay shopping for.
To be fair, my grandma took care of me a lot, and she worked at that bookstore a lot, so I read pretty much all of the movie novelizations, not just the sexy ones, but I did pay special attention to those.
It's such a throwback thing that I don't think kids will ever have because content is so readily available now. Like, I don't think kids will ever have that sort of like desperation for like entertainment. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's true, because even at the time, I mean, the internet was around. Like, I was fine. I had things, but I don't know. I guess there was something about the written word that was sexy to me.
You are truly a Renaissance man, Marcus. You're really inspiring me right now. Yeah, I burned through my notes, man. Like, this movie is just like a whirlwind. I think I tapped into everything that I love about this movie. The strange structure of it, the brutality of the violence, like the really great...
Oh, sorry. I will say that the final fight scene between Van Damme and Pitbull is also pretty brutal, and it also takes place in like 5 parts, because he just keeps coming back for him, and you can tell throughout the whole thing, like, Van Damme can barely hold his own with this guy.
Yeah.
Like, he just happens to get by every time, but it's really solid, and I will just say that this is the first time I've revisited this movie since first seeing it, when it first came out on video in like 2009. So I watched it then, and I remember being okay with it, but then I just watched Day of Reckoning within the past year or two, and yeah, I kind of always thought back to this one as being more of like a throwaway one, or one that was more of a straightforward Universal Soldier movie and like wasn't that memorable, but then like, oh, Day of Reckoning was something weird and different, which it is to an extent, but like, I was surprised at how fucking solid this movie was.
Yeah, I think that this movie has more of a pragmatic direction to it. It's very lean, it's really mean, but the small moments of drama really land. Day of Reckoning is like a Lynchian comic booky horror movie. Like, it's a whole different animal, and I think that John Hyams was a genius for not just trying to top the action of the first one and instead just veering left. I think it's what a true artist does. He says, like, this is what people expect out of this medium, out of this tool. I'm going to talk about the same concepts that I want to and have the same sort of moments and scenes and dramatizations that I want to, but instead I'm going to completely flip you on your ass. Like, the fact that half of the movie is like a implanted memory is so weird. Or not an implanted memory. It's like influenced by an implanted memory. It's
By
so
the way,
weird.
Spoilers, haven't talked about that movie yet.
Oh, sorry. Can you
show.
bleep all that? Can you bleep all that? I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
Maybe I'll just do that randomly and not explain it at all. I'll just bleep out everything. No, it's totally cool. But no, that's the only reason I still give Day of Reckoning a little bit of a leg up over this one is just because of how fucking weird it is.
Yeah, weird. I think that's another thing all the dissolvers kind of have is like, you get points for weird. If you can do something great with
points
weird,
for different and weird, because again, the same way like most movie critics and stuff will give points for being different or weird, even if it doesn't stick the landing. It's just because they see so many movies and they're so used to seeing the same thing over and over again. Whenever you veer off course or do something interesting or new, like, you get points for that, even if the whole thing doesn't quite work.
Yep, ambition needs to be rewarded, and Day of Reckoning is an extremely ambitious movie. Definitely beep out me spoiling the movie. We're having a chat. I got excited. I forgot that there's a huge chance people haven't actually seen Day of Reckoning, and it has a very surprising structure to it.
Yeah, I might edit that out, or I might just put a weird bleep sound in or something.
Yeah, whatever.
So
you
to
can
bring this one to a close, Universal Soldier Regeneration, where you're going to give it a 1 to 10 rating on a Van Damage scale. Now, I kind of say 1 is like Derailed, which is an early 2000s direct-to-video Die Hard ripoff that he did, which is fucking terrible, to a 10, which would be like a Bloodsport, or like one of his all-time kind of best movies. And you're grading it on not only like it as a movie as a whole, but also just as a Van Damme movie, like what he gets to do in it, how he is in it, and just kind of overall feelings on it.
I'd give it a 9. I think that the sequel delivers a bit more of a more expansive, ambitious Van Damme performance, and I think it shows off more of like what he's become as an actor. But as a performer, I think that this movie has, I think his best, maybe not his best fist fight, but his best gunfight for sure in his whole career. And it shows that he's still willing to ground himself into the dirt to get these takes right. He's willing to do the long takes. He's willing to do the super physical roles.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty goddamn impressive, man.
Well, and I think that's something that's actually helped his career a lot more recently and stuff, is that he's been doing this for so long and worked with so many different directors, like especially a lot of directors from Asia and stuff that he brings over to make American films, even like John Woo and Ringo Lam and stuff like that, to where he knows so much about the filmmaking process and even just blocking scenes and choreographing fights and stuff. Like, he is so involved in every aspect of that when he makes a movie that it shows how effortless it seems for him, but it shows like how far he's willing to go and all of that. And I wouldn't go quite as high. I'd probably give this a solid 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I picked the movie, so I probably it makes sense I would rate it a little high.
But no, that's the thing. I think, again, the last half hour or so kind of is the movie. Like, that is where everything ramps up and it's fantastic. But the rest of the movie is also very good. But like I said, it's the kind of thing where, like, Dolph Lundgren doesn't show up till 56 minutes in, and that's when it really kind of picks up. But no, it's a solid 8. It's a solid movie. And again, kind of barely remembering anything about it and kind of always thinking of like, oh, that was kind of a throwaway movie. That was a setup for, doing something weird and different with Day of Reckoning. I was pleasantly surprised at how solid this movie was.
Yep, and it kind of delivers on everything you would want on these movies. It's got big old fist fights. It's got great shootouts. It's got very energetic action scenes, and it's got fun characters that you want to see what they do next to the movie, because there are characters that just shake the movie and completely change it. And I love it to pieces.
So, Peter, plug your junk. What we got going on?
So
I meant junk in a loving way.
Yes. When you said plug your junk, I was like, Marcus, is this from The Astronaut's Wife novelization?
I did not make one mention of a navel, so you need to calm down.
That would be weird if it kind of buried in like a belly button fetish, but it didn't. But yeah, I was gonna say is my co-host, who I talked some shit about him earlier, but I love him. Aaron Armstrong. He was on the Sudden Impact episode, I believe.
Sudden Death
episode. Him and I were on this podcast called We Love to Watch that Marcus will be on soon, and we'll definitely cross promote the two shows so you guys can have links to both of them at some point. And the We Love to Watch is on iTunes, Stitcher, all those normal sites, and our website is WLTWpod.com.
Yeah, definitely check it out. It is a very good podcast, and I will always support it. I am going to be on it eventually, which I'm excited about, but it's also just a lot of fun, and it's not typical in a lot of film podcasts where it is just like maybe an hour long. You guys just jump into the movie. You guys go off on a lot of different directions. You play games. You do different stuff like that. It's a lot of fun to listen to.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And me being stupid, I misplugged the site. It's WLTWpodcast.com. Sorry.
Okay, see? I had to give you a second to figure it out.
That's our Twitter handle is pod, and then it gets confusing. But yeah, thank you very much for the compliment. We can't wait to have you on. It's
Yeah, absolutely. And also, yeah, follow you guys on Twitter. It's is it We Love to Watch Pod? Or is it just WT?
It's WLTW Pod.
Okay.
On Twitter. So yeah, and it's been really fun.
And you have a Facebook page as well. Facebook.com/We Love to Watch.
I would love if you guys join the group and get some updates on us. And yeah, we're having a lot of fun sort of in this pool of the different Dissolver podcasts and getting to meet all these great guys because I love Crushed Celluloid. I love your writing on the site. I love both your podcasts. Like this is it's been fun getting to chat with you guys.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's been great having that group because there is just, you get to see everything that a bunch of different cool, interesting people are doing. But also, like, yeah, that's kind of, this is why this podcast exists because I've been able to pull guests from that Dissolve group.
I was going to say, it's Dustin Koski, who has been on our show a couple times. We're going to be announcing soon. He's doing a short form podcast, and we're kind of trying to start a little network thing.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm pretty sure Brandon Leddit, Swampflix, is down too.
Yeah.
Who I actually just met in real life.
Oh, really? How was that?
Yeah, this past weekend, I took a trip to New Orleans for the weekend, and I was there with Cole. We were both there, and we went to go see The Dead Milkmen Sunday night, and Brandon also went to that, and we hung out with him and saw the show.
Holy shit, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I met Aaron once in real life, which is kind of funny.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you guys were friends. Did you guys hook up through the Dissolve group?
Yep. We recorded. We bonded over the game Bloodborne on PS4, and then we started chatting over PS4 chat a little bit. And then the first time that we recorded a podcast episode, which isn't like kind of buried away, we'll put it out there someday. But it's a Superman 4 episode. That was our first time talking, like having an actual conversation ever. So it's kind of weird when people are like, "Oh, you guys must have been friends for years." I'm like,
"Yeah, you guys have a really good rapport." So that works. Like, because Cole and I, we've been best friends for over a decade. We met senior year of high school and have been best friends ever since. So you guys tend to have like a good rapport for each other for not knowing each other that long.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was gonna say I think we picked well in terms of temperament because we love doing the show. We can't wait to have you on.
And you can check out this podcast. I mean, if you're listening to this, you're listening to it. But yeah, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, junk like that. Check out Crushed Celluloid, and we'll see you here next time on Jean-Pod Van Damme.
Keep asking them questions, just trying to get some kind of answer. Nothing. Just a simple yes or no. It's ridiculous. I knew it's something to tell you. It's right there. The tip of my tongue. Shit. And I'm sure I'll remember it in a minute. Just wait right there. Something so familiar. Can't explain it. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You understand. You don't have to answer. We're good like that, right? We've been over this all before. I'm just gonna do something here.